Well, hello and welcome to episode 14 of District 71's Brand Builders Toastmasters Unplugged live events. Tonight it's entitled Speak, Post, Perform. Hi, my name's Nigel Smith and I'll be your host this evening. And what we're planning this evening is something really quite special. We hope to guarantee that we'll make it as interesting, fun and entertaining as we can. Now, tonight our guest empowers engineering leaders to break free from operational overwhelm. And he's also a business coach for engineering success. Now, prior to this, he also had a really successful career as a marketing director in an electronics business. And a little known fact here, in a previous life for both of us, we've crossed paths professionally. He remembered, I didn't. Still, he has an amazing stage kudos, which I've seen a few times, both at division and district level. He brings energy, presence, and above all, the one thing I really love, humour, with him at all times. If that wasn't enough, he's walked the coals with no one other than Tony Robbins. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, but I think about a dozen. Maybe exaggerated, but it's more than 6, I think. And is a graduate from Tony's Mastery University. No doubt we'll find out a little bit about that as we go along tonight as well. So let's get to it then and welcome tonight's special guest, the fun, the lively Luke Biddle.
Wow, what an intro, Nigel. That's very kind. Lots of accolades being thrown there. Really appreciate that.
I think we're done, aren't we, Luke? We could, our work is done. We can go now, can't we?
Well, it's the wrap, as they say in the movies, isn't it?
How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Nigel. I've been at a 2-day conference with my business coaching academy. So I've just driven back from Hull. So you think that'd take the wind out of my sails, but as I think you alluded to, I've got quite a high level of energy.
Yeah.
And so I'm always ready for a conversation, whether that's on camera or in person.
Yeah. Well, that's a really interesting place to start. It's not where I was going to start, but we will start there because post-COVID now, when it was in COVID, everything was online. And one of the things I learned during that period when I tried to get smarter with what I was doing is you just need more and more energy for the virtual world as to the in-person world. I mean, do you want to just talk to that a little bit in terms about, well, first of all, where do you get your energy source from? Where do you get your batteries from? And how does it play out for you in those 2 different environments?
Great questions, Nigel. So where do I get my energy from? Well, I suppose from my mum and dad is the obvious answer. But I think it's, I suppose the French would call it joie de vivre. It's about having a level of joy and fulfillment. And I think the more you experience that congruently, the more authentically that comes across. And I think in Toastmasters, that's really important because the more energy that we've got, the more we can show that. When I first started public speaking, I suppose, years back in my corporate career, it was too much. I only had one speed and it was really, really fast and really, really intense and really, really high impact. And I think one of the things that Toastmasters has helped me to do is to contain and wield that energy in different ways. So sometimes that's slowing it down. Sometimes that's pausing for dramatic effect. And sometimes it's really going full on with that visual presentation mode as and when it's called for. But I think that's where, coming back to your original question, you know, when you're on camera, we've really got to go through the screen. So people think they're looking, you know, to the screen, but I think you've got to look through the screen to the person behind the screen. And if you're on stage, then you'll know yourself. You've got to bring that level of volume, depending upon the size of the audience, of course, whether we're microphoned or whether we're just talking naturally. I think when we're online, we've really got to have that more energy because we've got to push through and engage people from the other side of the screen. You'll know yourself from when you're on Zoom calls, 60% of the room have their cameras off. Yeah. And I think the more energy we can bring, the more we can encourage people, if it's safe, legal to do so, put their screens on and actually bring that energy back. Because as Toastmasters, of course, we love an audience. We love the energy that we get from the crowd. And I think that when we can harness that, it can actually be more energy to any presentation that we're making.
Great answer. And it sounds like, Luke, you've got big batteries to store all this and just unleash it whenever you need to.
Are you saying I'm fat, Nigel?
No. You can get very lean ones out, high capacity, high density. I just see you surrounded by like a Tesla Powerwall or something. You just sort of call on it to dissipate whenever you need it. But just coming back, I mean, I did stalk you on LinkedIn, as I said earlier today, for all of your career highlights and stuff. You clearly worked in the customer space where relationship and communication is vital, and in those sort of roles and circumstances, really, high level of soft skills and engagement necessary. What was it for you that made you think that you needed Toastmasters? Because you were doing that particular. What did you think was missing?
Great question, Nigel. I suppose that from an early point in my career, I was presenting on stage. Like most people who have a corporate job, there'll be some presenting, whether it's in a small room or whether it's on top of the stage, at a conference. People always told me that I was a good presenter, and I think that's just because I was loud and fast and wasn't afraid.
Yeah.
But whenever I would be preparing for a conference, I had a lot of nerves and a lot of nervous energy, and I would over prepare and I would overthink, and then I would just rev myself up into that almost over energized state, and I just wanted to kind of get through it. Once I was on stage, I would enjoy it, but it was a version of enjoying it. And I always wanted to feel more natural, like at any moment I could just step up and speak up. But I always had to have this layers of presentation and getting towards it. I don't know if any of the listeners have maybe experienced that you've got a big presentation to do. And you might know everything brilliantly and have really prepared, but that nervousness and that anxiety gets in the way of a great performance, and that gets in the way of great communication. So I think that, I was very lucky that in my corporate career, I did work with a speaking coach who really helped me to start to think about vocal variety, pausing, moving with power, moving with intention. So I did get better, but I still couldn't get rid of that feeling that, I really needed to prepare for it. And I was hyping myself up. And actually, I got an invitation to join Toastmasters probably 10 years ago. And that was the Birmingham. And I went to one event, and I just found it a bit overwhelming. Everybody was really good. And I thought, I'm not sure that I'm ready for this. So when somebody else, a good friend of mine, Marie, who was the VP of membership for Heart of England, invited me along last March, it was that kind of second call to action. If you know the hero's journey, sometimes we refuse the call to action. And when it comes again, we say, now I'm ready. And so I wanted to go along and develop my skills and be ready at a moment's notice to communicate in the most powerful way possible. So that's what brought me into Toastmasters. And so I suppose, I had a degree of skills already, but I think that and some of the other things that I've done have really, I feel like I'm a much more capable presenter now as a result of the Toastmasters environment and some of the other public speaking experiences that I've had since.
Excellent, thank you for that. So the follow-on question from that, I've got two others in the back of my head if I can remember them in just a second, but we'll go one at a time. So what is it that keeps you at Toastmasters, Luke?
One of the great things we do at Toastmasters, there's always a great role to do at Toastmasters. And when I started, I think the first thing I did when I went to my Toastmasters meeting was tabletop topics. And I like to think that I'm quick on my feet and I've got a quick brain, which sometimes can be a hindrance because I talk too quickly and I get too excited and I lose people. But tabletop topics are really, really enjoyed. And that's what I think made me think, I've enjoyed that, I'll go back. And when we go through all of the different roles, my Toastmaster tip, I think, was relating back to my corporate experience. When is the best time to practice an important career-defining speech? Is it A, the night before at 3 a.m. before you're going to go on and do the speech because you've left it so late? Or B, is it every 2 weeks with regular cadence, practicing all of your different communication skills in a safe, supportive, encouraging and great feedback environment? And for me, Nigel, the answer was always B. So I think it's having that platform, that audience, that environment, most of all, a supportive environment where people are really kind, but they're also very accurate with where you can improve. And being able to give that feedback and receive that feedback from all of the members of the club has, I think, been instrumental in my acceleration.
Right. So I'll just hit two things with you. Just give you one answer. So, prepared speeches or table topics? Which do you prefer?
I really love table topics. Really love table topics.
Because table topics was your option A from before, wasn't it? It's all like last minute in a sense, because you're thinking on your feet, you're structuring your thoughts and all those other things. I often think to myself, because I sort of avoid it a little bit, because I don't actually I love being a table topics master, because you're sort of in control of what everyone else is going to answer. But I do avoid it a little bit. But I do think that table topics or impromptu speaking is a true art of communication. And if you do it confidently without all the ums and the ers and stitch a story together with meaning and an impactful start and big call to action, it's the best sort of way, really. And I'm still on that journey to sort of trying to perfect that. But I just want to pick up on something you mentioned a little earlier, Luke, where you said that, the nerves and, feeling the flutters, not being unprepared and that when you're doing something big. Do you still get that today? If, for example, you're going to be on like I saw you, the district level contest, or you've got a big corporate presentation to you, a couple of minutes before you walk on, what sort of feelings go through you, and how do you contain them, or how do you channel them into something more positive?
Great question. I think I really don't suffer with the anxiousness anymore, but I do think that one of the challenges that we have is we confuse nerves with excitement. See, where we feel nervousness in the brain is very close to the region where we feel excitement. And there was a Harvard study done a few years ago where they looked at what impacts performance. Now, often if you feel nervous, people will say, calm down, just calm down, take a deep breath and calm down. Now, the effect of nerves and stress is here. It's a high energy experience. And we're trying to say, calm down. So we're trying to pull ourselves from here to here. That's quite difficult. However, nerves versus excitement are very similar neurological patterns. So if instead of saying, I don't want to be nervous, we say, I'm not nervous, I'm excited. And in this Harvard study, the test was done on karaoke accuracy. Took a whole load of people, the control group weren't given anything. And then the test group, they were told to say out loud, I'm excited about my presentation. I'm excited about my presentation. And just by telling ourselves that we're excited about our presentation actually creates the right kind of energy to bring a really great presentation. And it avoids the brain thinking about what could go wrong and instead focuses on what can go right.
Yep.
So that's one of the things that I do. But I think now I am at the stage where I do enjoy it because I've done a lot of practice. I think for me, it's about wanting to give a good performance. And in something like, for example, the humorous speaking, it's the opposite of tabletop topics because it's about the delivery and it's about remembering the story. Now, it's not about being word perfect, but it is about, a good humorous speech will have a lot of callback humor. So it's important that we don't miss a line that we then later refer to because that isn't going to make sense for the audience. So I think what I've learned now is I don't get nervous about the presentation, but I do like to lean into rehearsal and performance so that I can give a good presentation that's enjoyable to the audience. Also, of course, with that eye on how could I make it even better next time.
Oh, excellent. And from what you're saying just there, nervousness and excitement just feel like two sides of the same coin, and you choose to be heads up, don't you? Because you're right, actually. I think, neurologically, it is the same sensation. It's like getting those butterflies in your stomach to feel positive about it, and, you become what you believe, don't you? So if you think, you haven't got it, then you're not going to have the right presence. But if you're there and you think you've got it, or believe you've got it rather, then that's the heads up, isn't it? Which is, you're going to feel the excitement for it, which is a really great takeaway. Thanks for sharing that. I also want to just go on. Sorry, yeah.
Can I share one other tip with people who might be watching tonight?
Oh, yeah.
So often we'll get the advice, just take a deep breath, 10 deep breaths to get ourselves in the right state. But what we don't want to do is we do our deep breaths, then we walk up and then we stand there. And I see a lot of people doing this, they just can't wait to launch straight into it. But one of the things that we know as more experienced Toastmasters is to just take a moment to become present on the stage. And the most The sort of least obtrusive breath exercise and the most effective is something called a physiological sigh. And that's a specific type of breath where we breathe in twice and we breathe out a long breath. And when we do that through our nose, it looks a little bit like this. And if you try that now, and if you're watching, please try this with me. Two short inhales in and one long out through the nose, and you'll physically notice your heart rate will go down. And it's the best way to center yourself before you take your first words. It's a really great way to just center yourself and give your audience the best of your abilities.
I've just done it and gone for the dramatic.
I know,
it works. Yeah, it makes a huge difference. Again, I just wanted to call out from what you mentioned a little earlier, Luke, when you mentioned just prior to when you joined Toastmasters, and also a shout out to Heart of England speakers in Solihull in Division E. We'll give that a pump here. Excellent club, one of the best around. And yeah, so you also mentioned at the same time you were looking to join Toastmasters, you had a voice coach, which is specifically, I guess, like a one-to-one type of relationship. Could you spend a couple of minutes just explaining the difference that angle gave and what overall you feel is like the best in terms of value or focus or output or growth in that sense?
Yeah, I wanted to do more public speaking. I left my corporate role in 2020 and became a business coach. And whilst not everything I do is about public speaking and presenting, I do believe that being a good public speaker makes you a great communicator, because a lot of the skills that we develop and we learn as a Toastmaster or as a public speaker are those that we can then call upon when we might be having a networking meeting, a phone call, a pitch. All of those things are communication based. And I think that Toastmasters gives us a great platform to practice on a regular basis. Now, to augment that for me, I met a fantastic speaker coach. She's a TEDx speaker coach. Her name's Laurie Mabellis, and she's a great friend of mine now. But I started by taking her 8-week public speaking academy. And what Laurie does differently is Laurie actually helps people to understand the power of storytelling. And it's very, very powerful. It's not just from the point of view of how do I make what I say into a story. It's understanding the reasons why stories are so powerful. And what Laurie has an amazing gift at doing is actually helping people to see how their own story can be turned into something that could be the thing of a Hollywood movie, together with a lot of the techniques that allow people to really enjoy the art of public speaking. Because as we know, it's the number one fear of humankind is public speaking. So more people are afraid of public speaking than they are of dying, which means if you're at a funeral, you're better off being in the casket than doing the eulogy.
Yeah. Excellent. So that really instilled in you then, Luke, the true art of storytelling, which, as you quite rightly point to, is almost what is it in storytelling that connects with us, gives us that emotion, that feeling, why we listen, why it becomes memorable. So was that something you managed to package and then bring into Toastmasters and evolve from there as well?
Yeah, I think so, because it was a lot about the engagement techniques that TEDx speakers will use to create their 18-minute powerful stories. Because if you've ever watched a TEDx, you'll know that it's different from a typical presentation that we'd see in a corporate environment. You know, often the way that they'll start, there'll be some kind of engagement or a question that will allow the listener to have a different experience. Something that Laurie shared with me is there are 3 types of speaker. There's an informational speaker, there's an inspirational speaker, and there's a transformational speaker. So an informational teacher is someone who knows a lot about a subject, and they can tell you about it, and it's usually facts and figures, and you'll forget 90% of it before you leave the auditorium. Then you've got an inspirational or motivational speaker that will get you fired up when you're there, because energetically they're causing you to use your mirror neurons to feel a certain way. And that will think, I like that, I'm inspired, I'm going to go and take action. And you might remember 20% of what they've shared with you. But the best speakers are able to create a transformational story. And what that means is that by telling stories, they're helping the audience to live through that emotion or think of a time in their lives where they experienced something similar. So whilst the narrator on stage, the presenter, is telling one story, the listener is experiencing their own version of the story in their mind, which is actually embedding it in 7 places in the brain, rather than the 1 or 2 from an informational speaker. So it has a greater impact, and it means that people are more likely to remember you and to know, like, and trust you. And that's why within a social media context, using that kind of communication style is going to make people remember you and want to do business with you.
Right, I've got questions coming from all over the place now. So I wrote these down: informational, inspirational / motivational, and then transformational.
Correct.
So where did you start and where are you heading for? Or where do you think you are now?
Oh, well, that's a great question. I suppose it depends on the context, because sometimes we do just need to give information when we're answering a question.
Yeah.
As a coach, the idea is that the definition of coaching really is that a shift in thinking has taken place. So if we were working together, Nigel, and I was helping you to solve a problem in your business, I might ask you some questions, because the quality of the questions you ask yourself determines the quality of your life.
Yes.
But if you said to me, how do I do this? I wouldn't ask you a question, because I'm just wasting time. So there is a time and a place for mentorship and for consulting with people and for coaching. And I think the best transformational speakers will combine those 3 in order to know when to give information, when to give inspiration, and when to provide transformation. Mm-hmm. So I suppose they build on one another, and it's how do we use them effectively to create the transformation in the minds of our audience that can help them and to maybe want them to do more work with us in the future.
Great answer. Thanks for that. And I can't move off the subject of mentors, can I, without mentioning Anthony Robbins or Tony Robbins. I don't know whether you're on first name terms with Tony, but tell us a bit more about that experience and why did you do so many barefoot hot coal walks?
Fire walks, well, Tony's well known around the world for his fire walks. And while some people might think, why on earth would you do that? Really, the fire walk is a metaphor for the things that we think we can't do, because most people think, I can't walk on 2,000-degree hot coals. That's ridiculous. And yet the process that Tony goes through that gets us ready to take on that fear and overcome it. Afterwards, people who experience the firework will think, well, if I can walk on hot coals, what else can I do? But we can achieve exactly the same results by breaking a board, by even tearing a piece of paper, because it's about breaking through something that we thought that we couldn't do. And even though I've done it many times, every time I do it, there's a new challenge in my life that I want to break through. Because as Tony says, there's always another level. And I think if we think about everybody's journey in Toastmasters, everybody comes into Toastmasters at a certain level, and they might get to the next level and next level. And whenever they leave, they're at another level for them. So whatever level you are in life, whether it's Toastmasters or whether it's a Tony Robbins conference, it's always about taking yourself to the next level for you. So my first firewalk was in 2007, and it really changed my life in terms of what I knew that I was capable of after I did that. And when I left corporate, I did all of Tony's programs and invested in myself, went through Tony's Mastery University. Then I started crewing with Tony. I've been through his leadership program, and now I'm a senior leader with Tony. So I do almost all of his events, both in person or virtually. And every single time I do one of Tony's events, it doesn't matter how many times I've done it before. What we get is spaced repetition, and repetition is the mother of skill. So the content has a different context because of where I am in my life. So I can hear the same thing at a different time in my life and get a different result when I apply it.
Right. And I guess just to use one of your words from previously, I'm sort of assuming that whole relationship, that whole series of work that you've done has been utterly transformational for you personally. Is there one big takeaway from that whole catalogue of experience that you can call on now that's moved you to a particular place?
That's a great question, Nigel. If I had to boil it all down, I guess I'll frame two things. The first thing is the difference between success and fulfillment, because there is a science of success and there is an art of fulfillment, and you need both in life. How many people do you find who say, I'll be happy when I've got a bigger house, when I've got a better car, when I've got a better salary, when I've got this trophy or this goal, or I've climbed this mountain? Whereas actually, when we're fulfilled, we're experiencing the joy of life and appreciation in that moment. So, there's a lot of cliches in life, but they're cliches for a reason. Life is a journey, not a destination. And like when I get there, then we look back and go, oh, well, I wish I was back there when I was enjoying things. When you haven't got the achievement, you want the achievement. When you've got the achievement, you want the time and the youth and the energy that you had. So I think we've always got to appreciate where we are. One of the other things Tony says is we've got to trade our expectations for appreciations. Now, if you just take your relationship with your loved one, how many times do we often get frustrated with our partner when there's so many things that they're doing well that we could be appreciating in, instead of the one thing that might be frustrating at that time? So the science of success is getting what you want. The art of fulfillment is wanting what you've got.
Excellent.
So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is that you don't experience life, you experience the life that you focus on. And what I mean by that is that you're always free to decide what's happening to you. Is it good or is it bad? Shakespeare said, there is nothing either good or bad. It is only thinking that makes it so. And if we apply that to the lens of our own life, you can see something as, what else could this mean? What can I learn from this? Or you can see it as, why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
The other question is, how is this happening for me?
And again, it's back to that choice, isn't it? What we spoke about earlier with the coin, with nervousness and excitement. It's what you choose, isn't it? And the lens you look through to what you want to receive back, in a sense.
Absolutely.
Excellent. You going on to a few quotes there. And one of my favourite all-time quotes, well, they're sort of linked really, but one of my favourite Tony Robbins quotes goes along the lines of the quality of life is the quality of your relationships. I don't know whether you ever heard him say that or seen that quoted, but what does that mean to you?
Well, relationships are very important to me. I mean, we all have 6 human needs, but love and connection is one of those needs that we all have. And it depends where we prioritize it. But one of the things, and I was talking to a colleague of mine today only about this, is that one of the things that creates a happy, healthy, long life is good relationships. I think there were some experiments done that were terrible, that when you starve babies of affection, they do not do well at all. So if you're lonely without friends or loved ones, then you're probably not headed for a long, healthy, happy life. So I think the quality of our relationship certainly determines the quality of our life. Lots of things determine the quality of our life, but certainly relationships is one of them. And I think with that lens of trade your expectations for appreciations means that whatever quality of your relationship is, there's always more that we can do when we decide to focus on what's great instead of what's wrong.
Definitely. Excellent. Oh, thanks for that. Luke, let's just move on a little bit then. When I did the intro for you, one of the things I noticed when I've seen you in action at contest, we've spoken about the energy and all that sort of stuff, but the one thing you do brilliantly is humour. And the way you bring it out and you get that energy. Why is humour important to what you do, and what do you think it means to people that listen to you?
Well, I always think that if you're not having fun doing something, you're not doing it right. And I think that's the same in business. I think it's the same in education. I think it's the same in relationships. Life is for living, and having fun doing it, I think, is the best way to get the most out of yourself and out of others as well. Of course, there are things that are serious, and not everything can be a laugh and a joke, but we can always enjoy the process if we decide to. So for me, I've always enjoyed comedy, stand-up comedy, humor. My favorite films are rom-coms and, humorous films like that. So I've always loved it. I've always loved comedians. And so I think when I was in corporate, I was kind of trying to suppress that a little bit and trying to be serious and get things right.
Yeah.
But since leaving corporate and working for myself and defining what life looks like on my terms, humor is really, really important. My wife will tell you I'm always kidding. The 2-day conference I was just at, I have a slew of jokes that I've gathered over the last 40, 50 years. And some jokes I've remembered from my first part-time job at an aquatic shop, a place called Shirley Aquatics, very near to me.
I know it. There's a just a complete aside. I've got a fish pond in my garden from Shirley Aquatics on Stratford Road from years ago. Anyway.
Yeah. So my jokes are that old, Nigel.
Right. Okay. Well, we might have a chance for one of those a little later because I will come to talk back on all of that. But yeah, humour, not taking yourself too seriously, that combined with the storytelling element, I just think makes someone like yourself ultimately very relatable. And that comes back to the connection, the trust, rapport. Again, in the line of work you do now and the line of work you did before, about relationships, about connection, that art of communication really serves well in that instance.
I think so. And I think, when we're forming relationships, what's really important is to create rapport with people. And, certainly as a coach, we sometimes ask challenging questions, and you can't do that if you're not in rapport with people. Yeah. So, one of the things we all need to do to create great relationships is to be able to create rapport. And the faster we can create rapport and trust, the more we can develop that relationship. And I think that when you make somebody laugh, it creates rapport very quickly, and it kind of breaks the ice and creates a community between people. So my coach actually says to me, whenever she might be not cold calling, but calling somebody up to have a conversation who might not be expecting the call, how quickly can you make somebody laugh? Because we make people laugh, we bring a smile to their face, and we improve the quality of their day. And I think that everybody can benefit from that.
Excellent, thanks. And just taking that one stage further, Luke, I know because, again, when I stalked your LinkedIn profile earlier today, I noticed there was a few posts on there about something quite amazing you did quite recently, which was a new thing to you. I trust we're on the same wavelength there. Do you just want to talk our audience through what that was?
Yeah, so I don't think we've talked about it, but, I recently competed in the national championships for the humorous speech contest. And I actually entered that pretty much, I think it was the second or third week that I went to my Toastmasters, and I was told there's a humorous speaking contest. Do you want to enter? I said, yeah, okay, I'll have a go. I thought it was a longer tabletop topics, and I had a story which became Wham Bam Amsterdam Tram, and that was the name of my my award-winning humorous speech. So I ended up developing that a little bit more, and I went from winning at the club level to winning at the area level to winning at the divisional level, and then going on to the district championships. And there's a lot of humour in that, and so I kind of developed that. And in order to bring the right level of humour into it, I started working with a coach to actually improve my ability to bring humour into the story, because for anyone who's been to a national championships, the quality and the competition is exceptionally high. I've never been to a conference before. So the first time I went there, I was in the final. So I had no idea what the quality was going to be like, but I'd been told it was very, very good. And it was absolutely outstanding. I was blown away by the quality of all the speakers that get to the district level. But I'd done a lot of work on improving my humour, and was really pleased to get third place on my first attendance at a conference. So from that, I enrolled in a stand-up comedy course to help me with the humorous speech. But unfortunately, the one I got onto really didn't start until almost at the time of the humorous speech, but I carried on with it. So that finished in June, and I actually did my first stand-up comedy routine at a pub in King's Heath, and we had about 60 people in there, and I did a 5-minute stand-up comedy routine. And because I'm a glutton for punishment, Nigel, I decided that I would make my stand-up comedy routine about the process of business coaching. Now, it's about as funny as you'd think. So actually making it funny without it being offensive was quite a challenge, but I was quite pleased with the results. And actually, I shared it with my colleagues at my business coaching academy last night. So I performed it again. What I would say about any time you enter a competitive environment or you put yourself under the pressure of doing that, whilst the final performance is important, I think it's the journey you go on, pushing yourself to do the work, do the preparation, do the practice, and do the performance. Because now I've done that, I've got a vocabulary within my communication sphere that I would not have had if I hadn't stepped up to that challenge, both the humorous speaking and also the stand-up comedy. So I think when you push yourself to that next level, you start to create a much bigger ability in yourself that you take forward with you. And I think that's what helps us grow as a person.
Excellent. And I've just got a couple of questions, Iman. I'll do one at a time, but just going through that contest stream, if you will, Luke, all the way from club, all the way to the dizzy heights of district. You've talked about some of the things you captured on the journey on the way that made and improved you, particularly in the Toastmasters world. What else did it elevate within you? You mentioned about the star quality of the speakers at the various levels, and that increases. Were there any other great takeaways that you took from that process, which say to you, I'm going to do this next year, or that's really elevated this piece of understanding or cemented this piece of knowledge? Was there any standout parts for you at all?
For me, this was the first time that it's my first year in Toastmasters. And because I won that and I got to the area level, I was able to go over to compete in Leamington with the Leamington Spa Seekers and Godiva. And I met a lot of people from other Toastmasters clubs. Now, had I not entered and got through, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have just gone to another club and entered the meet. But what I found out from the journey is that any Toastmaster can go to any other Toastmaster club and go and do a speech there or go and experience it.
Yeah.
And so I was lucky enough to meet people from, all of the kind of West Midlands clubs. And then at division level, I met other people. And I think the ability to see the best of the best from all of the clubs as you go through. So I suppose what I would say is that if you're in Toastmasters, you've never competed before, A is just have a go, because just from preparing yourself for that next level really elevates your own practice and commitment and focus. And if you don't get through, then go along and support your local club members who do get through, because just attending an event is brilliant in and of itself. You'll meet other people, but because the quality is that next level up from your own club, you'll actually take away so many things. And because, for example, with evaluation, I'd never really thought about evaluations, but when you hear the evaluations, it gives you a totally different perspective on your own presentations, and also on how you can serve your club members with feedback. And that inspired me to enter the evaluators contest when that came around. And I think just being in the competition on humorous speaking improved my ability to evaluate along the journey. So, the more I think you get involved, the more you learn, the more you grow, the more capable you become.
Great. And actually, a really great reminder you said there as well, Luke, is that when you're a member of one club, you actually have a worldwide passport to any other club on the planet. I think there's roughly about 14,000 of those. But the reason I asked you that, because on my own personal journey, I had a similar thing. I got to the dizzy heights of district during COVID. And yes, it was that was virtual, but then it started post-COVID in person. And sometimes you can feel a false sense of security just in your own club, and they get to know you. It's a bit like a family. And when you step outside to another club or go to a contest, it's almost like joining it all over again, because it's like, But then when you start getting that feedback from there, that family just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so thank you so much for sharing that piece about that. my next question really comes back to your stand-up piece. Don't worry, I probably won't ask you to do a bit of a 5-minute repertoire if we've got time.
I think I know it well enough to just do it, Nigel. I'm not saying I'm going to, but that's.
I'll tell you what we'll do then. We'll dry up 5 minutes before the end, and I'll just let you roll, and we'll do that because I think that would be great for the people here to see that sort of arc of the hero's journey for you that's got you to where you are right now. The question I was going to ask is clearly, going to a Toastmasters club, you've got a specific audience there. If it's your home club, you know most of the people, bar a few guests maybe. Yeah. You know what to expect, and you can be authentically you, and then you're transported into, if you like, Showman Luke in the comedy club of the pub in King's Heath with an audience of 60 people, which is not small by any imagination, that don't know you but have got very high expectations that they want to be entertained and have a bit of fun. So I guess two-part question really. How was that different? And I suppose, how did you flip your two-sided coin? And now, how did you manage that expectation, and how did you sort of make it roll in sort of comparative terms to what humorous speech in Toastmasters would be?
Yeah, great question. So I think with the humorous speech in Toastmasters, obviously, it's about a story and it's about the delivery and the performance of it. And that's what the judges are looking for. If you look at the criteria, it's a story that is humorous. And what I observed when I was at the divisional level was that there's a few people who gave great speeches, but they were more like stand-up. And I spoke to some of them and they've done stand-up. And that's one of the other things that inspired me to think, actually, these guys have done stand-up, but their performance craft is brilliant, and they all said, doing stand-up was the best thing that I've ever done for my public speaking. And I heard this from a lot of different areas. And then I heard it from somebody who said that he'd done it in Birmingham. And I thought, this is the fourth time somebody said doing stand-up is a really great way to improve your public speaking. So I think that's where the sort of the link came, that doing the humorous speaking, I was learning a lot of tools and techniques. I was learning from people who are really credible. And I'll call out a couple of people. Sanat from Heart of England, who's an incredibly brilliant speaker, and somebody who I respect tremendously. And I really look up in terms of what he shares with me and with everybody else in the club. And somebody else I met along the way was Andy Dixon, who is Andy's phenomenal. And when I watched Andy, I thought, my God, this guy's amazing. And we competed both in humorous speech and also in evaluators. And I went through on humorous speech, he went through on evaluators. But, the craft that you get from people inspires you even more to get to that kind of next level. I think that's what's the great thing about going out of your own club to see how other people do it, and also attending the conferences as well. So I think that's where it came from. The humorous speaking, I was seeing people using humor more than the storyline. And I thought, well, if I can combine the two, that's going to give even more value. And it was another journey on its own, learning stand-up, because stand-up is very precise language. You've got to get the jokes exact, but make it look like it's off the top of your head. So how do you take something you've done a lot of work on and make it sound like a tabletop topic?
Goes back to your preparation from before, I guess, as well with that. But I guess another important aspect of this is, apart from the verbals, it's all the non-verbals, the expressions, the gestures, the movement. How much part does that play in your performance, if you will, of what you do, either as stand-up or as humorous speech? Because I saw your Wham Bam Amsterdam Tram humorous speech, and I thought it was hilarious. And there was a lot of comedic movements in that, with your suitcase and rushing for a missing train, a train that's just left the platform and all those sort of things. How do you weave it in, and how much impact do you think it has in terms of your overall communication style?
I think it comes back to having fun. I had a lot of fun with the Wham Bam Amsterdam Tram story, and it started as me just sort of telling it, and then I added in different performance layers, and each of those different performance layers was pushing myself. If we think about the normal process in a Toastmasters meeting, of course, someone will do a prepared speech and they'll say, what Nigel wants to get out of this is he wants to focus on his vocal variety and his eye contact. So every time we do a prepared speech, within the Toastmasters framework, we want to focus on something, and our evaluator is going to share that with the group. And so everybody's going to say, okay, I'm going to think about your body language, Luke, because that's what you're talking about. So I'm going to be going over the top and really pushing myself to use more body language and gestures. And that is then going to give me that vocabulary, that physiological vocabulary, which I can then bring into the next speech. And every time we do a prepared speech or a tabletop topic, we're adding to our vocabulary, getting feedback on it, and then we bring it back in and practice again.
Excellent. And I'm going to make a statement here and trust that it's true. And I hope it's true for me and everybody else that's listening or wherever. But the best version of whoever we are is right now. Okay, because we're the product of our life to this particular point. You've shared and gone through your particular journey. This is just a bit of a warm-up now, Luke, for your 5-minute routine. So I don't know what size coin you're flipping now to get the butterflies into that sort of positive energy. I'm just trusting, because we are before the watershed, there's not going to be anything that's going to be too contentious that you're going to sort of cover, or you just put the beeps or the blanks in. But I think what would really nice is to showcase maybe towards the end of this particular chat with yourself, with you as best as you can, clearly on the virtual stage, going through your routine, sharing what you do, and trying to demonstrate all the great stuff that you've spoken about. How does that sound?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. And I'm just going to assure people this wasn't rehearsed. We didn't talk about this. But, but for me, the purpose of it is getting to that stage where you're always ready. You've done the work in advance. I always say to people, when it comes to a presentation, when we were at school, we go into an exam, who remembers that, that feeling you had before you went into an exam? And I remember lining up with all my school friends, and you'd be thinking, you'd be desperately cramming the last few pieces of information. Yeah. But at that point, it's done. All the hard work is done. The hard work comes before the exam. The exam itself is not hard. The exam itself is actually repeating what you've already done. And I think that a performance is a lot like that. All the hard work is already done. And at that point, it's just leaning into enjoying the process and celebrating all the work that you did in advance. And then, the feedback and the impact that you've had on all of the audience.
Excellent. So what I'm going to do then, Luke, I'm going to introduce you, and I'm going to remove myself from the stage, and I'm going to let you roll with this. How does that sound? Good with that?
It sounds good. I'm going to remind everybody that this is an in-person routine. So I don't know how it will translate online, but I guess we'll see.
You know those batteries we were talking about earlier with all the energy that you need when you're online to make it, sort of excellent. So what we've got tonight then, folks, we've got Luke Biddle from Solihull in Birmingham. He's here on the episode 14 of District 71's Brand Builders Toastmasters Unplugged with his new routine, his comedy routine. It's going to be fun. It's going to be engaging. It's going to be excellent. Luke.
I know what you're thinking. You're not sure if you like me. My name's Luke, and I'm a business coach. Now you're sure. Yeah, tosser. I tell people I know your job better than you do. Now, business and coach are two words rarely seen together, unless you're choosing a seat on an airline. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Rapid Success Airlines, operated by Snake Oil Airlines. Please take a moment to identify your nearest paying customer. They may be behind you, they may be ghosting you, or they may be unsubscribing from your mailing list. In the event of an emotional breakdown, gratitude journals will fall from the compartment above your head. Please manifest your own abundance mindset before dealing with your crappy team's performance. So what is it that I really do? Well, I inspire serial entrepreneurs to build empires and change lives. It's just me, sat on Zoom, in my pants. But on the plus side, I can supplement my income with a quick tilt of the camera and a login to OnlyFans. Mainly, I spend my days listening to grown adults whinging about why spending 4 weeks redesigning their logo was essential. And afterwards, it still looks shit. I've got a client called Derek Osborne, but to protect his identity, I'll call him Steve. Steve wears one of those Bluetooth headsets all day long, and he still prints emails. Every week on Zoom, he shows me his inspirational vision board. And behind him on his bookshelf, I can see one lonely, crusty sock. Ugh. On his website, Steve said that he's blended his passions to become a lifestyle guru and finance broker. He's definitely broker than his clients. One of his customers gave him a 2-star Google review. So he sent them a passive-aggressive mug that said, "Some people are never happy." I said, "Steve, that's not customer service. That's revenge gifting by weaponizing crockery." And he's always saying to me, "I'm not making enough profit." Well, Steve, why did you spend 12 grand on a business retreat to Ibiza? He said, "I was having a cellular recalibration and it was investment in flow state productivity." He showed me the photos. I said, "Steve, no one's networking at 3 a.m. in Pasha unless you're in an entirely different kind of business. But microdosing ketamine will put you in a continuous state of urine flow." Oh. I must tell you about my client, Angela. She is a solopreneur. That's like an entrepreneur, but slower. She runs a business called Harry Styles. I said, "Wow, Angela, that is a brilliant name for a dog grooming salon." She said, "Nah, babes, I do hair and beauty." Who for? Women who want to rewild their Brazilian? Angela wears harem pants and she offers a discount to people with blocked energy. She once tried to clear a late invoice with Sage, not the accounting package, the herb. She offers a 90-minute massage for 30 quid and she wonders why she's broke. I said, "Angela, at these prices, no one is getting a happy ending, especially not your accountant. The only thing getting rubbed off is your profit margin. What's your marketing plan, Angela?" She told me she spent 3 hours putting flyers underneath windscreens in Tesco car park in January, in a storm. Half of them blew away. I said, "Angela, that's not marketing. You're just contributing to Birmingham's waste crisis. It's fly tipping with a return address." Now she just waits till her energy crystals are aligned with the moon cycles and she lights an earwax candle. That's a candle made out of earwax. And then she waves a wand shouting, "Clientium attractus," all the while rimming a Tibetan sound healing bowl. But seriously, I love all of my clients. And if they were perfect at running a business, then I wouldn't be their emotional support animal. And they wouldn't be my cash cows. I've been Luke Biddle. And if you want to spend another 5 minutes laughing at a little prick, follow me on OnlyFans.
Nice one, Luke. Excellent. How do you feel?
Yeah, good. You know, I enjoyed the 4 years.
Yeah, I know you learnt one tip that we learnt from our common mentor, who's Sanat. One thing I learnt very early on in my Toastmasters career was I don't do as much as I can, but I noticed you did it at certain points during your piece there, was to smile when you speak, because when you smile when you speak, that sort of makes you again a little bit more relatable. But again, the preparation came through with all of that. I mean, how close was that to the one that you originally put together, the one maybe you delivered at the pub a few weeks back?
I think it was accurate. I don't think I forgot anything. Like I said, I did it last night, and I think I remembered all of it last night.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything that I missed out. You know, the one piece of callback humor in that is the slightly rude OnlyFans reference. So apologies if I'm before the watershed.
Okay.
And
You are, but people on catch up might be after the watershed. Depends where they are in the world, of course. But just moving on, we're coming to a close actually just right now. Would you believe we've been going almost 1 hour? I was trying to get as much value into these as possible. And I'm just going to ask you a pretty left field question right here, because I'm always interested in people's backgrounds on these sessions. And I'm not a plant person at all. So rest assured, it's probably your wife that knows about lots of all these different things. But I did notice, and when you were in the green room earlier, Luke, there's a couple of guitars on the wall behind you. So are you a guitar hero, or are they just there as art ornaments, installations, or what's the story behind those?
Oh, I can't move that. Yeah, I've got my acoustic guitar and my electric guitar on the wall there. I started playing electric guitar when I was about 14 at school. And I remember a friend of mine, his girlfriend played electric guitar. And I thought, wow, A, he's got a girlfriend at 14. And B, she plays electric guitar. That's pretty cool. So I remember we went on the bus to a shop in Shirley called, I forget what it's called now, Music Exchanges was the one in Birmingham Town. And we went in and she was trying out a guitar. And they had this guitar and amp set. It was about £100. And I hadn't even thought that you could buy an electric guitar. It wasn't part of my world. I was listening to rock music. But I just thought, wow, that's amazing. And so I immediately went to get a part-time job. That's how I started working at Shirley Aquatics, actually, because I wanted to earn some money. Let me tell you, my wages at Shirley Aquatics was £5 a day for 10 hours when I started working at 14, 50 pence an hour.
We're not ponderable, like 300 quid. I don't know where the money goes.
So I borrowed the money off my parents, and I went and put the money down, and I worked off at my job, and I started playing guitar, and I just really loved it. And every time I learned a riff or a chord sequence from one of the songs that I loved, I just thought it was magical. And from that point, I love guitars. I was in bands when I was at college and when I was at university. And it's funny because my identity is still that of a guitar player, even though I very rarely play. It's a part of who I am. And I love the fact my son, who's 5 years old, Zaki, he's got a guitar, he's got a drum kit, he's got a full-size piano, he does rapping and he does like beatboxing. And I just encourage him. I don't force him into it. But whenever he shows an interest, I love to just, give him the tools to allow him to just develop his interest. So yeah, music's a really important, almost as important as comedy.
Excellent. There's your inner coach coming out for your son. Excellent stuff. Well, we are pretty much at time here, Luke. I just want to say a huge thanks to you for sharing this past hour, your journey, your stories, your learning, your growth, almost your hero's journey. I also want to thank our assembled audience online, and also our executive producer, Olga, in the background. But just to finish off, Luke, do you just want to share one big takeaway, or maybe one call to action, or one simple message to the folks listening either now or on catch up that they can go away and embrace and try and improve their journey, or maybe follow the lead from your particular story at all?
Yeah, great opportunity. Yeah, thanks so much, Nigel. Thank you for having me on here. And what I would say is that we are all capable of far more than we think we are. And, I am fascinated with human potential, and I push myself to develop into the person I really want to be. And since leaving my corporate career, that has exploded for me. And I'm really on a path to becoming a person that I can be proud of, and that my wife can be proud of, and my son can be proud of. And where I think that comes from is being able to ask for help, because sometimes we're really hard on ourselves. We don't give ourselves enough grace. We don't have enough belief in ourselves, and we're afraid to ask for somebody to help. And I think whoever you are, whatever part of your journey on, if you think that you want more, ask for help. Don't be afraid to borrow somebody else's belief in you to get you to the next stage. And whether it's somebody that you know, whether it's a coach, whether it's me, I'm happy for anybody to reach out at theprofitduo.co.uk or any of my socials. If I can help point you in the direction of whatever help that may be. Maybe it's somebody like Laurie, maybe it's myself, maybe it's, you know, your Toastmasters club. I love connecting people with the resources that can help them to become the ultimate version of themselves.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Luke. Thanks for being a great guest here this evening. Thanks, everyone, for being on the call. And please do join us next time for episode 15.
Thank you,
Take care.
Nigel.